the prostitution angle essentially leapfrogs over that risk of rejection. But I do think in the long term, that's whether that's healthy for psychology, male psychology, and I don't claim to be a psychologist by any means. I think this may be, if I could create an analogy, perhaps a poor one, that this would be like sort of like a fast food approach, if you will.
Okay. I'm sorry we're a little bit late starting, but this session is called Men in Need: The State of Services for Men, and I'll ask each of the panelists just to speak for a minute or two, introducing yourselves and what it is you do in relation to services for men. Thank you.
All right. Hi, Jonathan Taylor. I'm from Texas, founder of an organization called Title IX for All. What we do really, we help students and their families who are kicked out of academia a lot of the time wrongfully. We help them take a look at their options, their legal options. We're not attorneys ourselves, but we are definitely connected with attorneys. We have a database of the 1,000 lawsuits that have been filed against higher ed institutions since 2011. And we use that to help our. We like to be the grease in the wheel, so to speak, to get some of these things turning. So hopefully that's sufficient.
Super. Hi, I'm Philip Cook. I'm the author of Abused Men: The Hidden Side of Domestic Violence, and another book called Women Sexually Abused Men: The Hidden Side of Harassment, Stalking, etc., etc. So that's my background. I also co-founded a group, which I'll talk about in a bit, called Safe Stop Abuse for Everyone, and it was many years ago. And I'll give you a little update on the progress of that particular organization, which you may be actually surprised at how much has been accomplished.
I'm Tim Goldich, and in terms of services for men, what I would be talking about is I'm on the board of directors of Mankind Project, which is also known as New Warriors. It's an organization that supports men emotionally, and primarily by creating an environment where men can get together in circles and support each other, not rely so heavily on women for emotional support.
Morning, everybody. My name is Justin Trottier. I'm from Toronto. I'm the founder and executive director of the Canadian Association for Equality. It's Canada's, as far as I know, only charitable organization with an educational mandate to raise awareness about gender equality issues from the perspectives of boys and men. In the last few years, we've sort of branched out and also become a social service agency. We've opened the first Canadian Centre for Men and Families, these being men's health and social service facilities, now in 4 cities, 3 in Ontario across the province, and then a part-time center in Calgary. We've just raised enough money to turn that into a full-time standalone center, the first of its kind in Alberta. And we're looking to continue to expand social service agencies as well as continue to do public education and research and advocacy work, all related to boys and men's issues. Very glad to be here.
Hey you! Yes, you! Watching this video. Did you miss out on going to the International Conference on Men's Issues? Or did you go and now you missed the fun times you had at this amazing event? Experience the magic of ICMI 2019 again, or for the very first time, with Honey Badger Radio's ICMI disc set. The disc set brings ICMI presentations together in one convenient package, as well as disc set exclusive Badger bonus content. Enjoy behind-the-scenes Badger interviews with free speech and men's issues luminaries, like Sargon, Janice Fiamengo, and Count Dankula, as well as a never-before-seen Badger cartoon. Also available is sparkling ICMI merch, such as our professionally designed program book, sticker sets, badges, and more. Go to feedthebadger.com and claim a piece of men's rights history for yourself.
Well, let me just start. Okay, what the hell? SAFE, as I said, was established, Stop Abuse for Everyone was established, probably 20 years ago, I guess. Young man came to me after the Abused Men book came out. He was abused, wanted to start an organization. We did. Eventually became a 501c3 and went through all that board and so on. I left after, I don't know, 5, 6 years, something like that. And, you know, it was a very tentative kind of thing. You know, as nonprofits do, boards dissolve and so on, not a great conflict or anything. And then we turned it over to the Men's Health Network to take over the 501c3. And with their support, SAFE has really began to, you know, generate some real programs and things like that. One of the things that I urged Diana Thompson, who runs it, to do about 3-4 years ago was we needed a database. In other words, we know that there are a good many shelters and crisis lines out there that do serve men equally, fairly, just as well as they do women. However, the National Domestic Violence Hotline couldn't care less knowing who they are. In other words, I've actually looked at their book that the operators use, and they will tell you how often they're open and where they're located and so on. So you call that, and they'll give you a reference to the local place near you. They're really just a referral service, and you can call them up. They're not going to give you advice. They just refer you to the local thing. And, you know, they'll tell you, they ask the questionnaire they give to the providers. You can find out that, you know, X percentage of those shelters will not allow a boy over the age of 12, even if accompanied by their mother, into it, which of course is a terrible tragedy for both mother and child, because they got to decide, okay, I'll leave the boy at home with the abuser, let's say, and, you know, it's an awful thing. But we know they're out there. In fact, I spoke last year at a shelter in Phoenix, very low key, you don't know about them. They've been there 30 years, and they added a male program. Now, they're not part of the state coalition against domestic violence at all, so they don't want to be. Okay, and they added, you know, they have the services available, and it's excellent and well-run shelter with all the services necessary. Trouble is, we don't know where those are. We have no idea, not in a comprehensive fashion. So SAFE just now, a national directory of service providers. So, and they've even done an app of that, brand new this year. So if someone wants to know, all right, where can I find services that are real? Okay, so I won't be hung up on, basically. You can take that app and find out for real whether or not those services exist. So I think that's a major step, and they're still working on the directory and so on. But it's just a really good step in the right direction. Way while back then, we did the first brochures in the country that were nationally available for gay men, and similarly for the lesbian women who were abused. You know, those two groups in particular, you know, did not want to acknowledge the existence of being human beings, basically, you know, because they're an insular group and they're, you know, marginalized already. They didn't want to have that in a part of the public knowledge. So we had the very first brochures for lesbian victims, the very first brochures for gay men. Of course, nowadays it's opened up again. You know, there is an acknowledgement, yes, those sectors of society are human beings as well and have problems. And so that's been part of the SAFE mission as well, and is to continue to do that brochures in 2 languages, actually. And then they started a Stop Bullying for Everyone program in schools. And there's a National Speakers Bureau. And so they're doing really, good work in a very comprehensive fashion. And finally, there's some funding through the agency of Men's Health Network to have them continuing. They're based in Bakersfield, California now, and have a really good internship program too. So there is stuff out there, and some progress is being made.
That's great. That's awesome. Are we taking questions or just talking?
I have a question. It's just curiosity. What
Come to the mic. Come to the mic. Yeah.
A quick curiosity question. What would explain excluding boys over the age of 12 from shelters?
Well, because they're toxic and they're
Dangerous.
approaching adolescence, and they could
Okay.
molest another woman.
They might molest a young
Well,
lady.
you'd have to share a bathroom.
I
It'd be a
was
terrible
afraid
thing.
That was what it was.
Yeah,
Thank you.
there's no question that's the attitude. Is it changing? In some cases, yes, it is. Yes, it is. I know one thing in Washington County, Oregon. Again, she's not part of the state coalition against domestic violence, and she says, "No, we're not going to do that. Everybody in. Come on."
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I don't know if any of you have ever heard of an organization called Radar, which I was saying, is that better?
Yeah.
And why don't you give us your name? Why don't you
Okay,
state your
I'm
name?
Mark Rosenthal. I was one of the co-founders of an organization called Radar that existed from about 2005 until 2012-ish or so. And just by dumb luck, I hadn't planned it this way, but we put together a website, and we needed a phone number to put on it. I put my phone number on it, figuring, okay, maybe once a year or so I'll get a call from a reporter. And never heard from a reporter, but I was constantly getting calls from guys in need of help. I didn't know what I was doing. I did the best I could. And over time, as I met various people that I thought were trustworthy, I'd make a note, okay, so-and-so, here's his contact information. He knows more about such and such, and maybe I'll sort of add him to a list of people I might refer people to. Well, in any case, over time, that grew, and eventually I had sort of a network of people. That network is long out of date, but I live in the Boston area, and I didn't know of any place around Boston. A year or so ago, somebody who knows I'm interested in these things said, oh, you should contact such and such an agency, and they're in the town next to where I live. And they now tell me, oh yeah, we've been around since the late 90s, and we've always served men. Well, if you've always served men, how come I never heard of you? And I don't know if I can even trust them. So part of my question is, if somebody I know nothing about says, yeah, we provide services for men, how do I evaluate them and decide, yeah, this is, if I know of somebody in the area who needs help, can I trust that they'll get appropriate services if I refer them there?
As opposed to just lip service.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Denise Hines at Clark University, did this online survey, and unfortunately she didn't delineate, where the callers, were from, in answering those questions. And she found, the overwhelming majority of men who call hotline or shelter, are from the worst, just hung up on, no, you have to be the abuser, that kind of thing. I mean, this dissatisfaction level of that research was about 5 years old, but like 80% in terms of what, men got in terms of evaluating those services. And you'll hear later from Mark Angelucci, who, an attorney who did this wonderful lawsuit, went all the way to the California Supreme Court, proving that 20 out of 21 LA County shelters discriminated against men because they didn't test. From an abused man actually went through it, and they called up and made notes and all that. Went all the way to the California Supreme Court, and California Supreme Court said, no, that's unconstitutional. You cannot do that. And you proved your case, and you won it. Okay, so next year they have a task force, LA County DB Council task force. Okay, 5 years later now, we're still waiting for them to make any change of any substantial measure. So, Mark, you're absolutely right. You know, if you test, and what they say is one thing, but you've got to test it to find out, in truth, whether they really do what they're saying.
Yeah, I guess my question is, have any of you actually tried to evaluate anybody in your area, and what criteria would you use?
Well, SAFE is doing that with the database, and, you know, they're asking him those direct questions. And I feel pretty confident in that database because of what Diana Thompson has done in terms of her knowledge of how to test. And so it's a good start.
If I can just jump in there.
Go ahead.
So first of all, there's a lot of diversity across the sector. So different organizations, whether it's in domestic abuse or mental health or family mediation, handle men differently. So it's not a one size fits all. The other thing that's different is who you get at the agency. So if you talk to the executive director, they often are sort of political people that are hemmed in by their funders and the government mandates that regulate them and all of that. But if you talk to frontline staff, you'll often find a lot more support for men, because these are the people who take the phone calls from men and women and sort of understand the reality of the experiences that men are facing. So we've had a lot more luck at the Center for Men and Families networking with frontline staff, getting a lot of referrals of men from frontline staff, and then keeping our own database. And we haven't done it quite as systematically as you have, perhaps, but just organically over 4 or 5 years, we now have several hundred agencies. These are all agencies that have referred men to us, so we know that they genuinely care about these guys. And then we don't just stop by putting them in a database. We go and we network with them further, and we create potential for cross-promotional opportunities. Sometimes we are invited in or invite ourselves in to do workshops or training sessions to teach them how to do a better job for boys and men. There tends to be a lot of goodwill and genuine interest, but these agencies often just don't know how to do a very good job for boys and men. It's not what they're set up to do. So the training we've provided has helped them to improve their responses to boys and men. But you got to find those frontline staff who genuinely care, because they've been there for years at these agencies and they know that men really desperately do need the help. And then you sort of work from the ground up, and over time, those staff actually become your champions internally in those agencies to try to get some potentially policy and even funding changes that can then sort of percolate across the sector. But as you can guess, that takes a lot of time, so we have to be in this for the long haul.
I think I can help in this regard too. Can I interject?
Please.
Yeah.
So to the man's question, how do you know if who you're working with is legitimate? If you go with 501c3 organizations, charitable organizations, number one, if you go to their site, they ought to have a board of directors. Number two, they should have them all listed. Number three, they should have all the minutes of all their meetings, and their financials should be transparent as well. So you could look at the time, the legitimacy, the kind of conduct they have, and then open forums for review. So you can check the legitimacy of the organization to truly be who they say they are, number one. Now, their efficacy is something different, right? How good they do in the world, you can look at their programming, their proof strategies, how they document their progress, where their funding comes from, right? Who's backing this organization? All these things are indicators of their legitimacy, and then everything else is pretty much anecdotal, how people feel about what they're getting from the organization, unless things that got quantifiable. For instance, we put 60% of our men in jobs. Great, you should be able to substantiate that. You can write to them, may I see your stats? Right? We improved education by this much. Great, just write to them, could I see your documentation, please? So there are ways to see who is legitimate. I hope that helps.
That's Glenn.
Glenn Barker, everybody.
That's Glenn Barker. He's Center Director for the Chicago chapter of the Mankind Project here in Chicago.
Hi there, my name is Philip Tanser. I live in Scotland, and I'm currently working on a website. It's going to be called formen.international, and what we're trying to do there, and we're in the early stages, is first of all, we're going to try to have a list of all men's issues, and experts, but also just normal men's rights activists can post all their findings and the statistics that they found. So it's going to be like a database. But what we also want to do is groups and individuals can fill out profiles with in what area they work, and it's the same for groups like support groups. They can fill out where they are, what area they reach, what their focus is. And the plan is that you can type in your location, and then all male positive groups in your area pop up, and you can specify if you, for example, are looking for something like domestic violence, or if you are looking for homelessness and things like that. And the tricky thing is exactly what we were talking about now. Some of these groups are feminist funded. And I want to look into how can we rate, is this an organization that will help you in a male positive way or not? That is something that we are currently thinking about. Another thing that I think is very important, we're going to try to do that as worldwide as possible. Because certain groups have already set a foundation for other groups, and the more interlinked they are, if they can talk to each other, like CAFE, for example, is a great concept that other people might copy, and they could get your experience and say, okay, how did you do that? Maybe you can help us setting that up. So I'm working on that at the moment, just to let you know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Cafe would be an excellent resource for you because they've been there, they've done that, and they know how to do it in an effective way. So
maybe I can just jump off of that to say that to do what we're doing doesn't actually take that much money. So you can catalyze a lot of change across the sector just by having a space. I think that does make a difference, that people see you as legitimate. You offer some basic services. You do a lot of referrals to other agencies for services you don't provide. But over time, what happens is people will find you, in particular, when you're in a community where there aren't any other men's centers, and you will then gain the legitimacy by merely really existing and providing something tangible to the community. And by starting from something pretty small and with a very small, modest budget, you can then be around the tables where policy discussions are happening, funding discussions are happening, and then, as I suggested in my previous remarks, you can then slowly affect changes in agencies you work with and over time across various social service sectors. So it doesn't take a lot to just put that perspective out there. And the other thing that does is one of the problems we have is sort of a catch-22, where the funding that's available for charitable organizations to do services for men, the funding is oftentimes not available for men's issues, not necessarily because the policymakers don't want to fund men's issues. That is often a big part of it, but sometimes there's just no agencies to deliver it. That is a legitimate concern. So by being an agency that has the authority and the credibility to deliver men's programs, that excuse is no longer acceptable. And then if you can't do everything on your own, that's where you partner with other more established agencies, victim service agencies, or hospitals that deliver mental health programs of various kinds. You partner together. They bring sort of the professional establishment know-how, and you bring the men's issues perspective, which is the unique aspect of this that you want to sort of pioneer. And then when you put a grant application together, or another kind of funding appeal, well, now anybody who is at least open-minded enough to consider funding a men's program that has been grappling with what agency to fund, because there aren't very many, now there is a viable place where they can provide the funding. They've got the perspective that we bring that makes sure it's going to be used effectively on boys and men's issues to respond to some of the concerns that have been raised, but you also have the partner who brings the more sort of credible, established, professional background to the project. So that approach, that partnership approach, has helped open some funding doors. And we don't have to bring all that much money or resources to the table. And we're all fairly new at this, so the funding is going to therefore be limited until we grow sufficiently. So that's just one idea. Sorry.
Hi, my friend wants to open a men's center, and he wants to know what the ideal size and location for such a place would be.
That's really, where is he looking at doing this?
New Jersey.
New Jersey? Okay. We sort of lucked out in terms of our location in Toronto. I mean, our first center, Cafe's first center was in Toronto. We're now active, as I said, in 4 cities, but we've had our longest track record in Toronto, so I can comment in more detail there. We ended up being in a very good location. We chose it really for other reasons, more for operational reasons. The configuration of the space was ideal for us, but we ended up being very close to shelters, homeless shelters for single men. Also, there are a few family shelters in the area that will accept fathers with children. Not a lot of space for them, but they are there. We're also near a lot of other social service agencies. We're lucky being in downtown Toronto. There are a lot of social service agencies, so you're anywhere in downtown Toronto, you're probably going to be pretty proximate to a few of them, but we're in a particularly central location for that. So that's important if you're going to do the partnership thing that I've been recommending. We're also close to the 2 downtown universities. And if you know anything about Cafe's history, we sort of grew up at the University of Toronto, and we were very, very effective in terms of sort of galvanizing public awareness of our programs by putting on these fairly high-profile events. And you might have seen some of the protests of some of the early events that actually helped increase the profile. But the center we opened is very close to both U of T and the other downtown campus, Ryerson University. So that was very helpful as well. So I think location is very true about what we're trying to do. The space itself, as I said, it can be very small. Ours is 750 square feet, very modest, just a few rooms, but it's enough. I mean, we use it to its fullest. It gets a lot of mileage. The place is very busy, so you don't need to have a big space. That's not as important, I think, as the location is. Okay, you want to be close to your partners. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, get in touch with him. He'll help you get that center off the ground.
Do one in Ottawa.
Well, the one in Ottawa, I don't know Ottawa as well, so that's why I didn't quite want to comment on that. My understanding is they're maybe 10, 15 minutes from downtown, and I know they're right across from a very large, very established First Nations community center, and that they're working to try to create a partnership there too. So same idea there is you want to be in the right place and near the right potential partners.
Yeah, and in fact, that's a really neglected area. I'll speak later a bit more about this, but on the national level, the Department of Indian Affairs has finally established a men's health unit at the federal level, first ever, just this past year. Working with the First Nations or your local tribe, and there's probably one in New Jersey, I'm not sure, but there's probably something. Get in touch with them. You'll be surprised at their level of interest and their support. It's a little hard to get into that community. They're going to be a little mistrustful of you at the beginning, but work it effectively, and they can be an important ally.
Okay, my name is Michael Artle. I'm from Southern California, and I haven't had a chance to really formulate this question in a succinct way, but I think this is something that's at a deep crux in the issue with men, and I think it's pretty verifiable that men express their affection and their need for intimacy through sex. And in this country, except for a few isolated areas, sex workers are illegal or they're extremely expensive. And I can't help and I can't help but think that if men had alternatives to intimacy in society, to just putting up with the same old crap from their mate, that there would be a whole lot of tension siphoned off from the issues that men grapple with, beside the fact that there's no place for men to, there aren't men's shelters. I think there was one men's shelter and about 2,000 for women, and that's a whole different issue. But I think that there, in Europe, there's a lot more, there's prostitution has been part of society forever. And my brother used to say something really horrendous. He said if women didn't have a place for the men to park their, there'd be a bounty on them. I think there would be a whole lot more balance in the genders if prostitution were legal for gay and straight men, both.
I think Tim's going to say something here.
Right. Well, not really specifically about legalizing prostitution. That's a huge issue, very interesting and
massive.
Has many multifaceted. But what I wanted to say about that is men supporting men emotionally. Okay, so it's not just about sex. What men really need, even more than sex, is to be in a circle of men to share their pain with those who share their pain. Okay, to have intimacy and connection with other men and not be so dependent upon women for that, not be so emotionally starving.
Agreed.
So I really recommend Mankind Project, a New Warrior organization. It's not political. It has no political awareness really even. What it does very well. You go through an initiation weekend, you get bonded with other men. You choose a night of the week and get together every week on that night, and a circle of men that become your brothers. And you support each other in what you're trying to do, support each other emotionally, give each other tools for dealing with adversity. It's a fantastic place to go. It can fill a large part of the void that you're talking about and do so in a healthy way.
I'd like to speak to the question fairly directly. I think men in particular face the risk of rejection far more than women do. In order for men to have an opportunity to have some kind of intimacy, he must, in most cases, make the first step and risk rejection. And in our culture, men who are undesirable are treated as creeps, losers and stuff like that.
Incels.
So and sometimes it may not be because the guy is genuinely a creep. It may just be because some guys really just have no social skills, really.
Yes.
And the only really a lot of the time you learn by doing. If someone treats you badly the first time you try to form some kind of emotional connection, labels you a creep or whatever, then you're going to be disincentivized from trying that again. And
they get no practice because they've been shut down.
So in that sense, the prostitution angle essentially leapfrogs over that risk of rejection. But I do think in the long term, that's whether that's healthy for male psychology, and I don't claim to be a psychologist by any means. I think this may be, if I could create an analogy, perhaps a poor one, that this would be like sort of like a fast food approach, if you will.
There you go. That's good. That's good.
Quite frankly, yes. I mean, cheeseburger will get you through the day. But
you need a healthy, balanced diet.
You need a well-balanced diet. Recommended 2,000 calories. I'm sorry. I think that's it's getting at it's at best kind of like not a stopgap, if you will, or something that addresses part of the issue. But yeah, so.
Good question.
No, I think
Thank you.
This is something that needs to be explored more, and I like your organization very much. I personally was there for a couple of my friends, one through a divorce, another one his brother hanged himself. And then when my marriage went on the rocks, they were nowhere to be found. And women have this fantastic support group going that I am just envious of, and men just aren't around.
So why can't we have a brotherhood to match the sisterhood?
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
It's a good question. Good question.
Morning. First, thank you all for everything you do. I'm a little bit nervous, but a question that's bothered me a lot comes from, I'm, long story short, kind of the result of the current system in place here in the U.S. for handling domestic violence. And again, long story short, I lost everything. And I've always been a peaceful, nonviolent person, but this is just how things are. And I've been trying for ever since then to find out why. And I pay a lot of attention to what all of you do and what you do and what all of us do. I also pay a lot of attention to what seems to be happening on the other side. And all of what's in place for dealing with domestic violence and families in general seems to be driven by a lot of information, a lot of studies, a lot of statistics, and a lot of surveys that are being made to make it appear as though, men are monsters. And, I watched a strategy session for some domestic violence industry people. And aside from all the vitriol that they were throwing at folks like us, they were also really pressing this idea of the domestic terrorist. And, that it's basically all of the domestic violence issue in at least in the U.S. Is there anybody looking at, or is there any way to make a lot more broadly public just how either incomplete or purposely corrupt the information that drives all that is?
Sure. It's a long haul process. Back in 1987, the first national survey was conducted at the University of New Hampshire. It's all there. It's in the behind closed doors, violence in the American family. Nothing has changed since then in terms of the data. We simply added to the data. And Dr. Strauss, who passed away 2 years ago now, called it selective inattention. I'm a little more blunt. Half the truth is as good as a whole lie. And even the researchers themselves, the idea that deliberate misinformation, is out there. Don Dutton is here. Don, you're in the room? No. And he's a premier researcher in this, in worldwide actually. But he reminds me of Dr. Gellis actually. And I said this in my book, so he knows this. It's okay. At first, he was invited to a domestic violence conference, which he was many times, and he'd only speak about, male against female violence because that's what they asked him to talk about. And then, I don't know, last 10 years ago, he goes, nah, I'm going to tell the whole story. And Dr. Gellis, who was with Strauss, had the same conversion. No, I'm going to tell the whole story.
Susan's Diamonds.
Susan, right. These early pioneers in all this. And anyway, they're premier pioneers in this, in getting that information out. And so that process is continuing. I think in terms of, let's say you go to a conference like that, and a lot of times people just don't go, to Domestic Violence Council, whatever it may be, wherever, okay, there is one. Go, show up, give them the stats and say, how come you're only telling half the story? And that's all it really takes. You just got to go and getting it. I'm not saying get in their face, but stand up, speak, say, this is only half the story, and you're saying, what's the famous stat? A woman's battered every 15 seconds. Well, one, battering was not addressed. Did this happen once? That battering requires repeat. But the real stat is every 18 seconds, a woman is severely assaulted in her home. Every 15 seconds, a man is. That's the real stat. And so this half-truth stuff just needs to be confronted, and you just got to go and give them the full story.
If I could piggyback on what he said, yeah, the data's been out there. Professor, some of you may know what's sometimes called the Fibert bibliography.
Marty.
Dr. Fibert of California State University maintains a bibliography of roughly 286 scholarly investigations on the department website. Oh, you can't hear me? I'm sorry. Dr. Marty Fibert at CSU maintains a bibliography of nearly 300 studies on the Department of Psychology website, which, and these studies are, they go back to, the 80s. And so, I mean, the data's there. I just really think that, we just can't, we can't abandon the field. I think that's a lot of it.
Another great resource is the Partner Abuse for Special Knowledge website.
Sorry.
Sorry, we have to wrap it up there. Ladies and gentlemen, questions are in taking the panel.
Great.
Thank you.